Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. In today's webinar we are presenting two of the winning programs from CESA's 2018 State Leadership in Clean Energy Awards. Today we've got people on the line with us from New York and Oregon. The title for this webinar is State Programs for Clean Energy in Local Jurisdictions, Examples from New York and Oregon. And our host for this webinar is Maria Blaise Costello. She's a manager of program administration here at CESA. So before I pass it over to Maria and to our guest speakers, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. So you have a couple of options to join the audio portion of the webinar. By default, you probably connected via your computer's mic and speakers, but you can also call in via telephone if you prefer. If you'd like to minimize the webinar console so that you can view the presentation full screen, you can click on the little orange or red arrow that you see circled here, and you can also use that to maximize the webinar console. A very important note, we ask that you please submit your questions and your comments throughout the webinar. And you can do that by typing them into the question box on the webinar console and hitting send. We will be reading through your questions throughout the presentations, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. Usually we do one big Q&A at the end. For this presentation today, we're going to do a Q&A specific to that state right after it. So if you've got questions for New York, type them in early and often, and we will get to those right after that presentation. Same for the Oregon presentation. So a final note, this webinar is being recorded. We will send you a follow-up email probably this afternoon with a link to the webinar recording and to a PDF of the slides. And we'll also be posting that on our website at cesa.org/webinars. So with all of that out of the way, I'd like to pass it over to our host for this webinar, Maria Blaise Costello.
Thanks so much, Samantha, and thanks to all of you who are joining us this afternoon. I think we're going to have a very insightful presentations from two states. Before we get started, I want to just let you know a little bit about CESA. Many of you have heard this many times before, so please bear with me. CESA is a national nonprofit that was founded in 2003. We're supported by state energy offices and public funders of clean energy and philanthropy. CESA works with state leaders, federal agencies, and industry representatives and other stakeholders to develop and promote clean energy technology and markets. CESA supports effective state and local policies, programs, and innovation in the clean energy sector, and we place an emphasis on renewable energy, power generation, financing strategies, and economic development. CESA also facilitates information sharing, provides technical assistance, coordinates multi-state collaborative projects, and communicates the achievements of its members. And that's one of the things that we're going to be doing today. Sam, why don't you go ahead to the next slide for me? So today we're beginning a three-part webinar series highlighting the 2018 recipients of the State Leadership in Clean Energy Awards. And as Sam mentioned, and you all know, we're starting with New York and Oregon, and we're highlighting two innovative approaches that these states have used to support clean energy projects in local jurisdictions. A little bit of background about CESA. As you can see from the photos here, we've had a number of series of these awards. They were started in 2008, and we use them to effectively communicate and highlight the success of various member programs supporting clean energy technologies. CESA members nominate programs from across the U.S., and they are judged by an independent panel of judges that score all of the nominees based on the public benefits and results, cost effectiveness, leadership and innovation, and replicability of the programs. This year's winners were chosen by 6 judges, and you can read more about them on a case study, which we'll flip over to the next slide here, which also provides a quick synopsis of this year's winners and includes the contact information for each of the programs and the list of judges. So we welcome you to peruse this report. It's also featured on the homepage of the CESA website at www.cesa.org. So with that, what we're going to do is let you know a little bit of the additional webinars that are coming up. Today, again, we're doing New York and Oregon. On August 2nd, we'll be highlighting 2 programs in Connecticut and Minnesota. for expanding PV finance and markets in those states. And then the third webinar of the series will be on August 9th, where we'll feature Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Massachusetts for its energy storage program, and Rhode Island for the first offshore wind farm developed in the United States. You can register for these additional webinars on CESA's website at the URL there. So today we're going to feature Kelly Tyler and Brad Tito of NYSERDA first, and then we'll have Q&A following NYSERDA's presentation. So as you hear today's presenters, please note down any questions that you have in the question box, and we will review those and answer as many as we can as time allows. So NYSERDA is going to go first. We will then conclude the NYSERDA section of the program with Q&A based on their program. And then we'll move on to Oregon, where we'll feature Jennifer Calez and Michael Williams, and they will give their presentation followed by Q&A specific to Oregon. So with that, I'm going to start off with NYSERDA and introduce to you Kelly Tyler. Kelly is the Director of Communities and Local Government at the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, affectionately known as NYSERDA, where she leads a team that engages, collaborates and partners with municipalities and community stakeholders to address local energy and economic development needs with market-oriented clean energy strategies. Under Kelly's leadership, the department administers the Clean Energy Communities, Community Energy Engagement, and Cleaner, Greener Communities programs. Prior to NYSERDA, Kelly worked for the Buffalo Niagara Partnership as Manager of Business and Workforce Development, where she administered business growth and advocacy efforts through a 160-member manufacturers group. Kelly holds a Master's of Business Administration from Meddale College and a Bachelor of Arts in Communication and English from Buffalo State College. Joining Kelly is Brad Tito. Brad serves as a program manager for the communities and local government at NYSERDA, and he works with communities across New York State to save energy and improve the environment. He helped design and together with his team, launched NYSERDA's Clean Energy Communities Initiative. He specializes in municipal sustainability initiatives, including LED streetlights and community choice aggregation. Prior to joining NYSERDA, Brad served as a Director of Sustainability for the City of Yonkers, New York's fourth largest city, where he led a number of high-profile initiatives, including an award-winning LED streetlight conversion project and the establishment of mandatory green building standards. Brad holds a master's degree in urban policy analysis and management from the New School University and a bachelor's degree in sustainable development from Prescott College in Arizona. So we welcome both Kelly and Brad to today's program, and we look forward to hearing your presentations.
Great. Thank you, Maria. Again, this is Kelly Tyler here. So local governments play a critical role in affecting energy choices in our communities, both in terms of government operations and also across homes, businesses, and community institutions. Municipal leaders increasingly recognize that clean energy is not just good for the environment. Using resources more efficiently is helping save taxpayer dollars, create jobs, and drive economic development right here in our local communities. And that's really why in August of 2016, Governor Andrew Cuomo launched the Clean Energy Communities program in New York to recognize and reward local governments and communities for their clean energy leadership. So here's how the program works. NYSERDA has identified 10 high-impact clean energy actions. By completing 4 of the 10 high-impact actions, any city, town, village, and county in New York can earn NYSERDA's Clean Energy Community designation. Once they achieve the designation, they become eligible for a grant up to $250,000 to support additional clean energy projects of the community's choice. So New York is a big state. We're made up of 10 economic development regions, each with its own character and economy. And with this program, funding is set aside for each region of the state. Within each of the 10 regions, funds are set aside just for small communities and just for large communities. The grants step down in terms of the grant amount received, with the first to participate getting a larger grant amount. So the early adopters that get the designation first will get a higher level award. This creates a friendly competition among similar sized communities within each region. If we had offered a statewide program without this regional focus, it's likely that participation would be limited to certain areas of the state with the most what we call green committed communities. Because we set aside funding for each region, the grants are seen as attainable, and as a result, we're encouraging communities that have had no history of participation in the past with NYSERDA programs. Grants are being used for projects that include things like converting streetlights to LED, installing solar on municipal buildings, purchasing of electric vehicles, energy upgrades to wastewater treatment facilities, and so much more. To help communities prioritize and implement the high impact actions and to navigate the program, expert guidance is provided by dedicated, knowledgeable clean energy communities coordinators at no cost to the local government. We find this very key to the success of our program. We have established this statewide coordinator network consisting of regional planning and development boards, associations, and councils like the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board and the Finger Lakes Genesee Regional Planning Council. These organizations have long-standing relationships with local governments in their regions, and we're really able to leverage those relationships for the benefits of the program. These coordinators are truly trusted local partners to the government officials and staff within their regions. They provide services which include meeting with town boards and municipal staff and answering questions and providing assistance, providing LED streetlight cost benefit reports, providing assistance with software for tracking municipal energy use, identifying grant opportunities for electric vehicles and charging infrastructure, and much more. In addition to this free on-demand technical support, Clean Energy Communities also offers online toolkits for each high impact action with tools and resources including step-by-step guides, calculators, case studies, model language that communities can incorporate into legislation. These toolkits ensure that the program is sustainable even after our funding is expended. So what am I talking about here? These are our 10 high impact actions. They include benchmarking, where local governments adopt legislation to track and report the energy use of its municipal buildings. Clean energy upgrades, which is achieving a 10% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions amongst municipal facilities. LED streetlights, which in our requirement is converting at least half of the jurisdiction's lighting to energy efficient LED technology. Clean fleets, which is installing electric vehicle charging stations or deploying alternative fuel vehicles amongst the municipal fleet. Solarize, which is really undertaking a local Solarize campaign or marketing campaign to increase the number of local solar installations amongst the community. We've got Unified Solar Permit, which is streamlining the approvals process for local solar projects. We have provided energy code enforcement training, which is training code officials in energy code best practices. Climate Smart Community Certification, getting certified by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. In Community Choice Aggregation, or CCA, which allows local governments to choose where their energy comes from their community. To earn credit for this action, 100% renewable electricity must be the default power supplier for virtually all homes and small businesses within the jurisdiction. And finally, Energize New York financing, which is establishing a property assessed clean energy or PACE financing for businesses and nonprofits within the community. So many local governments in New York are not aware of available clean energy programs and funding opportunities. Those that we have found that are aware of the opportunities, they often struggle with how to prioritize and eventually implement the actions that will have the greatest impact in terms of cost savings and environmental benefits. We think our program provides local governments with a simple but robust and flexible framework to guide them through implementation of the most impactful clean energy actions. So as you can see from this slide, this is New York. We think it's really taken off in New York. Since the program launched almost 2 years ago, 198 communities or municipalities have earned the Clean Energy Community designation by completing at least 4 out of those 10 high-impact actions. 418 communities from across the state have completed nearly 1,200 high-impact actions for a total program impact of more than 200,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, equivalent to taking tens of thousands of cars off the road. You can see we have participation in every corner of the state, both large and small communities, urban, rural, suburban, and across the political spectrum. I'm now going to turn it over to Brad Tito, Program Manager for the Communities team. He's going to talk about some of the results that we're seeing.
Thanks, Kelly. So to put these numbers into perspective, clean energy actions completed through this program include almost 260,000 streetlights converted to LED, over 600 electric vehicles deployed, more than 800 electric vehicle charging ports installed, 662 municipal officials trained in energy code enforcement, 250 communities that are tracking and reporting their energy use of their municipal buildings, 268 communities that have streamlined the permitting process for local solar projects by adopting the Unified Solar Permit. So this is what clean energy looks like in terms of equipment and policy initiatives, technologies that have a street level impact, if you will. And this level of implementation is critically important. Without it, we're really going nowhere. But the nature of our challenge requires something more. It requires a cultural shift towards clean energy where everyone is participating. And that's why I get excited by these next slides. They really give me this feeling of excitement and anticipation that with some patience and persistence, our challenges can and will be addressed. Because in New York, a cultural shift is underway. So to date, communities that have earned the Clean Energy Community designation represent a total of 5.4 million people, or around 27% of the state's population. But if we look at participating communities, those are communities that have completed at least one high-impact action through our program. If you look at all participating communities, including those that have been designated, these communities represent 16.5 million New Yorkers, or 85% of the state's population. And this is a breakdown by region. So in the circle, you can see how many communities have earned the Clean Energy Community designation in each region. In green, you see the percentage of the population that is represented by designated communities, yellow by participating communities, and then red are communities that are not participating. And in all but one region, more than half of the population is represented by communities that are either designated or participating in the program. Now, our coordinators, right? Kelly showed you the slide, showed our statewide network. Our coordinators are out in the field meeting with local elected officials and staff. These discussions are documented in NYSERDA's Salesforce system. It's a customer relationship management software. And because we use this system, we have this wealth of data, which helps us to improve program outcomes. So this graphic shows for each high impact action, how many communities have completed the action, which is in green, but also how many are in the execution or consideration phase in yellow and orange, but also how many communities have said they're just not interested in that particular that action in red. So the raw numbers are in the table below. But some key takeaways here. So the Unified Solar Permit benchmarking and energy code enforcement training are the most popular actions. They're sort of the no-cost, low-risk actions that virtually any community in the state can take. And then they start thinking about clean fleets and LED streetlights or solarized campaigns. You know, the pattern here is they kind of score an early win, and then they get excited by this feeling of having made progress, but then they really have to get to work in order to earn the designation and the associated grant funding. And coordinators have had discussions with more than 700 communities statewide. And so while a total of nearly 1,200 actions have been completed, there are nearly 2,000 additional actions that communities are either considering or in the process of executing. So having this level of granular information allows us to better understand the pipeline of high impact actions and anticipate needs on both a statewide and a regional level. So we've employed a wide range of data analytics and visualization to help target program resources. For example, this information allows coordinators to apply different strategies and tactics for moving a community from being inactive to engaged, and from engaged to participating, and ultimately from participating to designated. And applying this kind of sales approach to high impact action engagement has really helped us to maximize the impact of the program. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly to talk about how the program has been received and some lessons learned. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. So the reception so far has been pretty great. Feedback we have received from local elected officials show that really, yes, these actions are good for the environment, but they're also a smart way to save money. These relationships we've built with our communities throughout the state are perhaps the most valuable outcome of the program of all. We've documented more than 200 articles and editorials in local press describing how communities are participating in the program. This is helping to foster local discussion about community benefits and really to demonstrate the viability of local clean energy. It gets at the issue of catalyzing a cultural shift. The bottom line is that clean energy communities help build the appetite of local elected officials for this type of work. Our job at NYSERDA is really to keep serving up the clean energy. That's why we are actively developing a clean energy communities leadership round so that communities can unlock new opportunities for recognition and grant funding for even more impactful actions. And there we go. So it's exciting because we think this program can be adapted to work in other states as well. The Clean Energy Communities program is based around high impact actions that address the needs of cities, towns, villages, and counties in New York. The program design is could easily include high impact actions that make sense in other places. I guess a few things or a few key lessons that we've learned from our program include local governments and communities often struggle with a lack of funding, lack of staff capacity, and a lack of information needed to prioritize and implement clean energy solutions. The technical support, as I mentioned before, is key. The support from the trusted local coordinators allow even resource-constrained local governments to complete high-impact actions and really to participate. The economic benefits of clean energy are also broadly appealing. Clear guidance, recognition opportunities, and even small grants are driving action. Once one action is completed, we also have found that the appetite or the communities are much more likely to pursue additional actions. And finally, getting them in the door with the low-hanging fruit, but going further and getting them into those deeper actions is also a key outcome that we're seeing. And again, perhaps most importantly, if communities are motivated by a desire to protect the environment or to save money or to create local jobs, whatever their motivation, communities are finding a good reason to participate in this program. So thanks, everybody. We'd be happy to answer any questions now.
Great. Thanks so much, Kelly and Brad. We do have a number of questions for you, so we'll get right to those. One of the questions is about the clean energy coordinators. How were they chosen, and then are they offered any training from NYSERDA?
So they were competitively selected through a different NYSERDA program. We actually had they were selected prior to the birth of this program, but we knew that we were creating a program like Clean Energy Communities, so we knew that we needed that local sort of training or local, support. The Clean Energy Coordinators, they're a $9 million effort that's supported again through our older Cleaner, Greener Communities program. We do get them together once or twice a year to provide training. We also do weekly kind of office hours calls with them, and we have monthly meetings with them as well. It's important. I mean, these folks come to the table with a broad knowledge, but there's obviously a continuous ramping up of not only the NYSERDA and utility opportunities in New York, but really keeping up with the technology advances as well. So we're in constant communication with them, and they're, again, having that locally trusted resource is what we think is key to the success of this program as well.
Great, thank you. Another question. In the future, might there be different levels of certifications dependent on the number of high impact actions taken by a community?
Well, Brad and I, we've talked about this many a times, and as of right now, we have the Climate Smart Communities program that we spoke about is a program in New York that is a more comprehensive program for sustainability, and I kind of look at that as sort of a graduate program. Right now, we're not necessarily going to come up with different levels, but as I mentioned previously, we are looking at leadership tracks, which will likely focus on getting communities to take those deeper kind of greenhouse gas emission reduction actions. Brad, do you have anything to add?
No, it's just it's a good question. We again have thought about this idea of leadership round as like bonus grants for when you do very specific sets of actions or activities, and we think this is a good way to sort of take the 4 out of 10 high impact action model, let that stay the way it is, so that if a community is implementing an LED streetlight project or they're investing in energy efficiency to their municipal buildings, that kind of work would continue and they can get credit for it and they can earn the Clean Energy Community designation. But if they want to excel, they can adopt one of these leadership tracks, and we'll give them very specific guidance of what they need to do, and then they can unlock new grants and recognition opportunities.
Great, thank you for that. Brad, I've got one specifically addressed to you. Here it goes. In local governments, there's not always a person designated to be responsible for this type of work. Who are the people within governments that you've seen as being the most effective to producing momentum behind these initiatives? And is there a pattern to the types of titles or departments that are most effective?
Yeah, so every town, city, or village in New York State has a code official. They're responsible for enforcing the building code. So, when we have energy code enforcement training, we make it very easy for them to come, and it's free, and they get credit for a high impact action. A lot of times they're the first ones to start advocating to do more within the local government. But in terms of the staff and the departments, it's typically either like a planning person or a public works person. But in the smaller resource constrained communities, you'd be surprised how many town and village clerks are the ones who lead the effort, or the town supervisor or mayor themselves, or town board member. But you know, they have to, there's quite a learning curve, but we've tried to give the guidance, make the guidance as clear as possible, and then have the technical support, and they can usually figure it out what they need to do in order to participate in the program.
Great, thanks, Brad. Here's a couple of questions related to funding for the program. How is the NYSERDA Clean Energies Community Program funded, and what would you estimate the cost of setting up this program to be if you were to take this to a statewide level?
So we get our funding for New York, and this program in particular comes from a few different sources. We have our Clean Energy Fund, which is a charge that's on the electric utility bills. It's a system benefit charge. We also have RGGI, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative funding, that's funding this, and that has funded the coordinator effort as well. We're also working with the utility, so the Long Island Power Authority, or PSEG, you know, Long Island, which is a utility downstate. We have partnered with them, in which they are providing the incentives on Long Island as an example. So it's not the full state, but it's a part of the state. So we, you know, in addition to our own funding, we really try to look for external sources as well. We also have a small bucket of funds that is settlement money in the capital region of New York State. So we're able to provide those you know, affected municipalities with the settlement fund with a little bit larger. We add $30,000 onto the grant that they would receive, you know, again, on a first come, first served basis. So, you know, in general, our funding comes from that charge. It's off the utility bill, the system benefit charge. We also have the RGGI, and, you know, those other pots that I mentioned are pots that we just kind of partner with other organizations with, and it's worked out very nicely.
Great, thanks, Kelly. And just to cost, can you just give what the budget is for this program? Because it'd be, I think, hard for you to estimate what it would cost other states to do it, but what's the program cost for this program?
Yeah, it's $16 million. And then, as I mentioned before, we also have the $9 million in funding to support the Clean Energy Coordinator Network statewide. The Coordinator Network is a 5-year program, and we have, 18 grants per our 10 regions, plus we just added a block, another block in each region, in which municipalities would get a $5,000 grant. You know.
Great. Okay, couple more questions for you. What, if any, verification impacts or greenhouse gas savings are done?
It was a question. I'm sorry, I just didn't hear you. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, the question goes to verification of I guess, results and how to calculate greenhouse gas savings.
Mm-hmm. So go ahead, Brad.
Well, just to say that we have an online portal where communities submit their documentation, and we don't ask for an excessive amount of paperwork, but we do get information like how many electric vehicles, you know, how many charging stations, how many LED streetlights were installed, and that allows us to analyze and verify some of the information. There's like a fire alarm happening, so I'm going to let Kelly finish the answer.
Yeah. So again, just to finish, we have come up with, during the development of the program, we developed some estimates to you know, establish sort of a baseline of what we think this program would implement, and as we get, you know, the actions completed, we're, as Brad alluded to, we obviously sort of ask the participating municipalities to provide us that information and any documentation with that. As we enter into contracts, so, you know, again, the contract or the municipalities don't get money up front to do those high impact actions, but once they achieve the designation, they're eligible for a grant. That grant is for an additional clean energy action of their choice. It doesn't even have to be something off our list. However, we are finding a lot of the municipalities are doing those actions that they couldn't do by themselves. And so we have created templates and estimates and calculators to help sort of ease the calculation of those metrics for the customers.
Great. So you kind of answered another question that was on the board here that I'm looking at, is about future plans to kind of promote other renewable technologies like hydrogen production, fuel cells, maybe energy storage. So again, the communities that get the designation and are able to apply for grants, those grants could be to support other technology areas beyond the 10 high impact actions. That's right?
Exactly, exactly. There is a review process by NYSERDA that, just because they submit, they want to, do X, it doesn't mean that it's an automatic rubber stamp. There's a set of criteria that we review their proposals upon, and then, we'll enter into contracts after that. But it could truly be, fuel cells to, heat pumps to, solar to, CCA, whatever.
Excellent. So I have just one last question for New York. How does this relate to New York's REV process?
This is, we're supporting the, REV, the Reforming the Energy Vision is really, this is an effort that helps to support that. I think, we're trying to build markets, and we're providing, information to end users at the community level to help make, better and more informed energy decisions.
Great. Well, Kelly and Brad, thanks so much for those great presentations and answering these questions. I want to give you the opportunity before we move on to Oregon's presentation. Is there any finer points or things that you'd just like to highlight about your program before we conclude your section of the webinar?
No, we've learned a lot from other states, and we've taken what other states have learned, and we've, and have done, and we've adapted it to our needs. And I encourage other states to, to feel free to contact us, and, if they're looking to create a similar program, I'd be happy to, lend our advice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Kelly Tyler and Brad Tito of NYSERDA. Their contact information is on the screen. So if anyone has any follow-on questions, I'm sure that both would be happy to answer them as best they can. We're going to move on now, and Kelly and Brad, you're welcome to continue on and listen to the next section of the webinar, and that will be dealing with the Oregon Department of Energy's Renewable Energy Development Grant Program. So as we move into Oregon and say goodbye to NYSERDA in New York, I'd like to introduce to you our two guest speakers from the state of Oregon. Jennifer Calez is the Public Affairs and Outreach Coordinator at the Oregon Department of Energy. She's been working in government and communications for over 10 years and has a master's degree in public administration from the Portland State University. Michael Williams has worked for the state of Oregon for several years with a focus on auditing and process improvement. For the last 2 years, Michael has been the program manager for the Oregon Department of Energy's tax credit and grant incentives, including today's topic, the Renewable Energy Development Grant Program. And Michael has graduated from Boston University. So with that, we're going to turn it over. Again, folks, as you listen to the presentations from Oregon, please enter any questions you have into the question box, and we will bring those up following the presentations and get to as many as we can in the time we have left. So Oregon, Jennifer and Michael, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. We are excited to talk about our Renewable Energy Development Grant Program today, so thanks so much for joining us for the webinar. We also owe a big thank you to the Clean Energy States Alliance for awarding our program with a State Leadership in Clean Energy Award and for the opportunity to talk about our program today. We'll start with a brief introduction of who we are. We are the Oregon Department of Energy, a state agency focused on leading Oregon to a safe, clean, and sustainable energy future. Our work focuses on a number of areas, including energy planning and innovation, conservation efforts, nuclear safety and emergency preparedness, siting large energy facilities in the state, energy system resiliency, and greenhouse gas reductions and climate change, among many others. Supporting clean energy is one of Oregon's top priorities. Our renewable portfolio standard aims to have at least half the electricity sold by our largest utilities coming from renewable resources by 2040. And coal-generated electricity will be completely phased out by 2030. That means Oregon's energy landscape will be changing. We are already seeing an increased interest in utility-scale renewables. In fact, our Energy Facility Siting Council, which oversees large energy facility proposals, approved Oregon's first utility-scale solar project earlier this year. 3 other proposed solar facilities are currently under review. As the state's energy department, our staff offers support and guidance for Oregonians wanting to conserve energy, improve efficiency, or make the switch to renewables. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mike, who will talk about our Renewable Energy Development Grant Program.
Thank you, Jenny. We are pleased to win a State Leadership in Clean Energy Award for one of our programs, the Renewable Energy Development Grant Program, also known as RED. Businesses, organizations, public bodies, schools, nonprofits, and federally recognized tribes are eligible to apply for competitive grants up to $250,000 if they install and operate a renewable energy system that produces electric energy. The grants cannot exceed 35% of eligible project cost. Historically, most of our incentives have been in the form of tax credits. What makes the RED grant program a good tool for us is that it reaches a broader audience of public entities, schools, and nonprofits, organizations that have a hard time using tax credits because they don't have a tax liability. To be eligible, projects must use a renewable resource to produce electricity, including biomass, solar, geothermal, hydroelectric, wind, landfill gas, biogas, or wave, tidal, or ocean thermal energy. We are not the only state with a grant program, of course. What sets our program apart is its innovative funding model. Established by the Oregon Legislature in 2011, House Bill 3672 authorized the sale of tax credits to create a pool of funds for grants, capped at $3 million in tax credits each biennium, which is every 2 years. The Oregon Department of Revenue held a series of independent tax credit auctions where Oregonians could bid on tax credits in increments of $500 face value. 9 auctions since 2011 have provided over $8.5 million to the RED grant subaccount for making grants. Grant applicants pay fees to cover the cost of administering the program, so all of the auction funding can go towards providing grants. It's worth mentioning that this innovative funding model, the sale of tax credits, also benefits the tax credit purchasers. In addition to allowing the buyers to offset their income tax liability, it allows them to directly support renewable energy projects in their communities. Some bidders will even pay in excess of the face value of the tax credit, and it still works out in their favor for their tax liability. An overpayment could be written off or considered a charitable donation. As the funds sit in the RED grant account, they also earn interest and create an opportunity to award even more grants. The Oregon Department of Energy typically sends out an opportunity announcement with available funding about once per year, usually $1.5 to $2 million at a time. The opportunity announcement outlines requirements for the program, details how projects are scored, and other important info like due dates and required submission materials. Applications need to be submitted before construction of the energy project. Applicants can apply for funding based on the size of their project. We divide the funds into 2 pools so similarly sized projects can compete against each other. That way, a 100 kilowatt project isn't being scored against a 1 megawatt project. Once applications are submitted and have gone through a completeness review, a panel scores the projects based on a number of factors. Feasibility of the system, in other words, is the project set up for success, earns the most points at 25. Energy generation and financial strength are worth 20 points each. This is a good illustration of why we divide funding based on size, since the amount of energy generation can earn up to 20 points. Job creation and other community benefits also earns points. One goal of the Renewable Energy Development Grant is to support diverse projects in diverse locations. For that reason, we also award points for projects in underserved communities and rural areas, as well as projects that diversify the types of renewable energy projects funded by the program. And new for our 2018 opportunity announcements, projects can earn up to 10 points if they had a resiliency factor. For example, systems that can supply electricity if the larger grid is down, systems that incorporate energy storage, or that can be tapped by the community or first responders in the event of an emergency. During the competitive review process, award amounts can be adjusted to help spread the funding to more applicants. We might reduce the amount of grants offered in order to help more projects get completed. Top-ranked projects move on to a technical review. This is a cross your T's and dot your I's due diligence phase to make sure the project is likely to be built as proposed. After passing technical review, the Department of Energy and the awardee enter into a performance agreement outlining the requirements to be awarded a grant. Performance agreements include a time frame for completion, usually 2 to 3 years, and construction must begin within 12 months of executing the performance agreement. After a project is complete, our staff will conduct a site visit prior to dispersing the funds, and projects must remain in operation for at least 5 years. This helps ensure good stewardship of scarce grant dollars. I'll now turn it back over to Jenny, who will talk about some of our program successes.
Thanks, Mike. Since 2012, we have awarded nearly $7 million in RED grant awards. 35 projects, all solar, have been completed and awarded, totaling $2.2 million. Another 20 projects are in review or have performance agreements. Totaling $2.8 million, these projects are mostly solar, but also include biogas-filled cogeneration, hydropower, and geothermal installations. And just last month, we announced 18 awardees for our 2018 grant round, totaling about $2 million. Most projects are again solar, with a few that have incorporated battery storage to get that resiliency factor. We also have awards for a biogas project and a microhydro project. Now, it's worth mentioning that these projects aren't just supporting the awardees, they also support the local businesses and industry, including engineering and consulting firms, and manufacturing and construction jobs for the installation of the projects. As you can see from this map of Oregon, RED grant projects have been awarded across the state, from large municipalities to small rural communities. The red stars represent the 35 completed projects, blue are still in process or under construction, and gold stars represent our 2018 awardees. We've been proud to support some really great renewable energy projects, so we wanted to share just a handful with you. This is a 56 kilowatt solar array at the Bend Area Habitat for Humanity Restore. For those unfamiliar with a restore, it's a retail market selling gently used furniture and other home goods, and the proceeds go towards supporting other habitat programs. We interviewed the restore team after completion of their project, and they reported that the electricity savings from their array are helping support homeownership programs in the community. Coyote Trails School of Nature is a great environmental nonprofit in Southern Oregon. Coyote Trails focuses on teaching and preserving the art and science of the earth, and they have a number of youth and teen education programs, and the 14 kilowatt solar array we were proud to support has now become part of the school's teaching curriculum, focusing on sustainability, green energy, and reducing your carbon footprint. SANTIAM Valley Ranch is a local business in the Willamette Valley. The farm has produced hay, sheep wool, ryegrass, sweet corn, and beans, and now also focuses on aquaculture, raising fish, which are used to stock ponds throughout the state. Between their red-funded 20-kilowatt solar array and a wind turbine at the farm, their electricity bill is $0. And by the way, that very cool customer in the photo is Carrie. We also award larger grant amounts, like a $250,000 grant to Mark McKay Farms in Marion County. 4 arrays totaling more than 350 kilowatts help power the farm's irrigation needs. And this project is really a renewable energy match made in heaven, since the farm's irrigation needs irrigation the most when the sun is shining. A $128,000 grant to Central Electric Cooperative, a public utility serving the Bend area in Central Oregon, supported their shared solar program, where customers can opt in to purchase solar-generated power for their homes and businesses. One of the largest projects we've helped fund is in Southern Oregon. This giant 6.8 megawatt solar farm covers 40 acres. You can see the magnitude of the project in the Google Maps aerial we included here. And the owner has a power purchase agreement with Pacific Power, one of the state's largest utility companies. Many applicants are able to leverage funding thanks to the strength of their projects. Awardees have also received federal grants, support from energy nonprofit, the Energy Trust of Oregon, and funding from Oregon utilities. In fact, for our first project example, the Bend Area Habitat for Humanity Restore, the nonprofit actually paid $0 out of pocket after its RED grant and funding from Energy Trust of Oregon and Pacific Power's Blue Sky Renewable Energy Program. And with that, Mike will wrap us up with the impact of these renewables in our state.
Thanks, Jenny. Of course, the program's main goal is to support clean energy in Oregon, and it's getting the job done. The 55 funded projects, not including our newest 2018 awardees, are built to generate about 103 million renewable kilowatt hours of electricity each year. That's the equivalent of preventing the release of 156 million pounds of CO2 when compared to fossil fuel generated electricity. This shows how even a relatively small program at a small state agency can make a big difference in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and fighting climate change. We look forward to seeing more RED grant projects with clean renewable energy come online, including our latest 2018 awardees. Thanks again to CESA for recognizing our agency and our program with the State Leadership in Clean Energy Award. We will continue supporting policies and programs that will support our clean and sustainable energy future. Stay connected with us on our website, blog, and social media. We also have an energy-focused podcast called Grounded, which is hosted on SoundCloud and available wherever you get your podcasts. We are happy to take questions and feel free to reach out. Our contact information is on this slide.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Michael and Jennifer, for your presentations. We do have a few questions to get through here. Let's see where to start. So the first one, is there any consideration of covering renewable thermal energy rather than merely renewable electricity within this program?
So this program is legislatively required to support electric generation, but projects like combined heat and power that do have maybe some thermal portion of it are eligible, but the project does have to have some component of generating electric energy.
Thank you. Another question, when scoring projects in the grant application process, are transmission studies performed to determine feasibility? And how are the projects that require transmission upgrades scored?
So during the application, one of the things that the applicants are asked to do is to demonstrate why their project's feasible or how it's feasible, and providing transmission studies or other documentation showing that they've done their due diligence or prepared will help them score higher points. It's not necessarily something that is required, but it is something that would help you demonstrate that your project is feasible, and the more feasible your project is, the higher your score on your opportunity announcement.
Thank you, Michael. Another question. let's see. For RED funded generating assets paired with energy storage, has any of the funding been directly applied to the storage system itself?
So the funding is for the project in whole. Again, as we mentioned in the previous one, the project does have to generate electricity. So a project that simply stores energy wouldn't qualify for a RED. But if your project includes resiliency factors such as energy storage, that can be included in the eligible project cost for determining your RED grant amount.
Okay, thank you, Michael. One question I have here is, what's the reasoning behind having the grant funds dispersed after the projects are built and not before? And does this cause a problem for groups that might not have upfront capital for projects?
So the main reason is to ensure that at the end of the day, these are state dollars, that they're used responsibly and that they go to fund projects that will continue operating, so that the funding doesn't go to something that doesn't get completed or doesn't shut down. So it's mainly to ensure proper stewardship of the funds. In the opportunity announcement and the performance screen and everything, we are pretty clear about when the grants will be awarded, so it's not a surprise to the applicants. And they do, as part of their application, also let us know how they plan to fund the project and how they plan to get it completed. And that often is, as we were saying in a previous slide, that counts to the financial ability of the program, so that we award more points to projects that definitely appear to be able to have the funding to be completed. And a lot of our programs, or a lot of our projects, we also mentioned, get funding from several maybe several different grants or several different agencies. So we work with them to let them know exactly when they'll get their funding. But the main reason is to ensure that the projects are built and continue to operate.
Thank you, Michael. Another question is there a reason why the majority of projects funded have been solar, and are there any efforts to expand this technology list?
We knew that would be a question.
Yeah, so the similar solar projects are a little bit more shovel ready. They can be put into more places. Not everyone can do a hydro project, for example. You have to have the resources there. A lot of the other projects take a little bit longer and require some more customization. So we do have projects that, as I mentioned, some hydro and thermal projects that were approved, and they're still in the process of being built, but mainly the solar ones are technology that can be put anywhere. People are able to install them pretty quickly, and it's fairly straightforward. We do try to reach out and make sure that, that's why we award more points for solar diversity, because we do want to encourage, multiple types of renewable energy projects, and so we do try to reach out and let people know what is available, and what projects qualify. But yeah, they are a majority of solar, so we figured that would be a question.
Well, thank you for addressing it. One last question for you. What types of marketing or public information do you guys conduct for the tax credit auction program itself? How do folks come to know that this program exists and that they can actually participate?
So the tax credit auction is administered by the Oregon Department of Revenue, and I believe they work with, they have some information available on their website. It's a program that's known by a lot of, I believe, CPAs and tax preparers are in the state, and they advertise it that way. We do get calls in, some things from Oregonians asking if there is this type of program, and we can point them to an upcoming tax credit sale. And then some people hear about it through word of mouth.
And do these tax credit auctions apply to other programs that the state conducts, or is it specific to renewable energy?
This particular the particular auction is specific to the Renewable Energy Development Fund, where the money will go. And this was the first time that the state had tried, first program that used the state tax credit auction system to do that. the state does also have another program that I believe for film and television industry that uses a tax credit auction as well. But the RED grant, but those are two separate auctions held at separate times, and the RED grant, as I mentioned before, was the first time that the state had tried this as a funding mechanism.
Great. I think this is the last question for you. Is there an available list of all the projects that have been given grants? Does that exist on your website?
Each round that we award the grants, we do submit a press release that includes a list of the awardees. Sometimes, for various reasons, those awardees may end up dropping out of the program, and so it might not be completely accurate, but it's mostly accurate at least at the time that we submit the press release. But if somebody were interested in learning more about the projects, feel free to reach out to us, submit a good old public records request, and we could get you some more information.
Great. So Michael and Jennifer, I think that wraps up your list of questions, but are there any other points or information that you'd like to provide before we close this up?
No, I would say, we really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this program. We're proud to be Oregonians and in a green state and a state where people really value clean energy. And thanks again to CESA for recognizing that.
Great. Well, thank you both for participating today and sharing the information and insights about your program. Sam, if you'd pull up the slide one last time about the upcoming webinars again, just to make folks aware that there are 2 other webinars that will feature SLICE Award winners. Again, here they are. You can register for them on our website at www.cesa.org. There's a webinar tab. So we hope that you will tune in again on August 2nd and August 9th to learn more about some really cool and effective state clean energy programs that CESA members are putting forth and getting great results from. So thanks all of you. Sam, that closes it up for me. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we end this webinar?
Well, I just want to direct people to the page I'm pulling up on the screen now. I'm sorry, there seems to be a train in the background. But if you'd like to learn more about the SLICE Awards, here's a link. If you'd like to connect with CESA online, you can find us on our website, on social media, and we do hope to see you at the next webinars. Thanks everybody for attending today, and yeah, hope to see you soon. Bye.
Great, and so these are recorded. We'll have this webinar recording posted up on our website as well as the others, so feel free to share the webinar link once Sam sends it out to you in a day or two with any that might be interested in reviewing these presentations today, and we look forward to seeing you on another webinar in the future. So have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.